Hey everyone, so in this video we're going to look at trigonometric identities. You've already seen some of them before, and the ones that you've seen are the following. Recall that tangent of theta is sine theta over cosine theta, okay? And we know that cotangent of theta is cosine theta over sine theta. So these are the two very basic identities that we already know. Then we know three identities which we call the reciprocal identities. Okay, what are those? Those are cosecant theta equals 1 over sine theta. Secant theta is 1 over cosine theta. And then finally, cotangent of theta is 1 over tangent of theta, right? So these are the ones that we already know. What I'm going to do now is I'm going to introduce you to three different, they're actually the same identity, just written in three different forms, okay? So, and we call them the Pythagorean identities, and they are as follows. So, if you remember, we defined cos theta as x over r and sine theta as y over r. Okay, so if I solve for x, I'm going to multiply by r on both sides, and I get x equals r times cos theta. All right, and then we have y equals r times sine theta. Okay, now if you also remember, what was r? R was square root x squared plus y squared, right? Or if I squared both sides, I get r squared equals x squared plus y squared. So if I substitute the value of x, what is x? X is r cosine theta, so then r squared is going to be r cosine theta squared plus r sine theta squared, which gives me r squared equals r squared cosine squared theta plus r squared sine squared theta. Okay, note that cosine squared theta is nothing but cosine theta times cosine theta, and sine squared theta is nothing but sine theta times sine theta. Okay, so I'm going to make that note here. Cos squared theta is nothing but cosine theta times cosine theta. We just write the square over here. Okay, now I can factor out an r. I can divide everything by r, right? I can divide everything by r squared, and that's going to cancel out to be 1. That's going to cancel. So what do we get? We get cos squared theta plus sine squared theta equals 1. All right, and this is your first Pythagorean identity. All right, now if we divide both of these by cosine squared theta, we're going to get cos squared theta over cos squared theta plus sine squared theta over cos squared theta equals 1 over cos squared theta, right? So all I did here was I divided everything by cosine squared theta. So that becomes 1. What is sine over cosine? This is tangent. But since it's squared, this is going to be tangent squared theta. So I have 1 plus tangent squared theta is going to be equal to secant squared theta. So that is identity number 2. Okay. And then I'm going to go ahead and divide this one here by sine squared theta. And if I do that, the identity I get is going to be cotangent squared theta plus 1 equals cosecant squared theta, right? So these are your three new identities. We have cos squared plus sine squared is 1, 1 plus tan squared is secant squared, and then cotangent squared plus 1 is cosecant squared. So again, know your identities, memorize them because they will be useful on the exam. Okay, so take a look. So in this example, we're going to look at how to figure out what is cosine t and tan t. given that sine t equals 1/2 and cosine t is less than 0. If you recall, we have solved a problem like this in the past, but what we're going to do is we're going to solve the same problem using trigonometric identities that we just learned. Okay, so first of all, let's figure out what quadrant is t in. Okay, so I know that sine t is greater than 0 and cosine t is less than 0. That puts your t in quadrant 2, right? Because quadrant 2 is the only one where sine is positive and cosine is negative. Okay, now, so I need to figure out cosine t. One of the ways I could have done this was I could have written that as, right, I could have done that as y over r, so y would be 1, r would be 2, and figured out what cosine was. The other way I can do is the relationship between sine and cosine we know is sine squared t plus cosine squared t equals 1. Okay, so if sine t is 1/2, sine squared t is nothing but 1/2 squared. Okay, plus cosine squared t equals 1. All right, so 1/2 squared is 1/4 plus cosine squared t equals 1. I'm going to subtract a 1/4 and I get cosine squared t equals 1 minus 1/4, which gives me 3/4. So cosine squared t is 3/4. How do I figure out cosine t? Well, I take the square root. So then cosine t equals square root of 3/4. Now remember, cosine is negative. That's why I need to take the negative square root, right? It's less than 0. And that gives me cosine of t equals negative root 3/2. All right? So I have sine t is 1/2, cosine t is negative root 3/2. How do I figure out tangent of t? Well, I know that tangent of t is sine of t over cosine of t. First of all, would tangent be positive or negative? Well, it's got to be negative since it's in the second quadrant, and tangent we know is positive in the first and the third quadrant, right? So that's going to be negative, and so let's see if it comes out to be negative. So this is 1/2 divided by negative root 3/2, and that would give me negative 1/√3 or negative root 3/2.